Folks that were here last time, just a couple quick thoughts about what stuck with you.
Once again?
What stuck with you? Maybe one or two people. Yeah.
I was really proud of the website that from last the first session, that a lot of people from different skin color, we show all of our frustration of the community here in the West St. Paul district, and I hope that frustration continues, because that frustration is what's building the momentum here.
Yep.
That's what I believe.
Yep. How to take that frustration and anger and turn it into an engine for action, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Something else, something that stuck with you.
Yeah, I think that, if anything, it was like, this is a lot more complex issue than BCI.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's how they get you.
That's how they get you.
You make it complex, so you don't want to break it down, and
Yeah.
it's too hard.
It's very complex and very simple, right? Like in terms of the lived realities and the frustration that people are speaking to, like it's a very visceral, real, like simple thing of like right and wrong. But when it comes to like the organizing and how to actually interact and navigate those systems, it gets complicated, right?
But well worth it.
But well worth it. Yep. Okay, how about maybe for some newer folks, some excitement or hopes for today and the work ahead? Yeah.
I guess I'm just from the equitable development perspective, trying to learn more about what it is that we can do. Between folks here. We live in a world where somebody has money, somebody has something to sell, they let that happen. We live in a world where laws define what we can and cannot do, whether it's right or wrong, moral or immoral. And so how can we combat a world with those types of criteria, this type of development taking over and changing things the way that it does?
Yep. Excellent. That's why we're here today. Yes.
Is for those people who've already been there, done that, what were the strategies that they found most successful versus the one that we tried it but it really didn't work even though we really thought it would? So kind of, I don't want to say best practices dealing with it, but these ones are the the big ticket item types that are going to really help solve our issue.
Yep. Yep. Excellent. Yep, there'll be a lot of that. I think both like what's worked and then like what were some of the challenges too. I think people will speak to both of those.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. So for folks at tables, you have these sheets that were some of the slides from Mary's presentation. Oh, they're on here too? Yeah. Awesome. All right, we're hi-fi, lo-fi. That's great. So just to kind of ground us, because a lot of what we're going to focus today is on equitable development and principles of equitable development. So I just wanted to kind of give folks a quick refresh on both the definition and some of the principles. So for definition, we have equitable development creates healthy, vibrant communities of opportunity where low-income people, people of color, new immigrants, and people with disabilities participate in and benefit from systems, decisions, and activities that shape their neighborhoods. Have you flip it over? And then we talked about some basic principles of equitable development. And I think today from our three panelists, you're going to hear how they embody all or most of these principles in the work that they're doing. Would people be willing to just kind of shout some of these out and go down the list?
Isn't it? It's just
Advance economic opportunity. Prevent displacement.
Expand affordable housing options.
Understand and respond to local context.
Promote broader mobility and connectivity.
Practice meaningful community engagement.
So great.
Develop healthy and safe communities.
Promote environmental justice.
Achieve full accessibility.
Excellent. Does that sound good? Yeah. Is that why we're here?
Yeah.
All right. West Side.
West Side.
Action.
Action.
Equity.
Equity.
I'm going to turn it over to Monica to talk about what's at stake.
Woo! This is great. Room of West Side people intentionally setting forward
our plans for our neighborhood and our community. A couple of things I just wanted to maybe ground us in a little bit as we get going. So this document that you all have in front of you, this is the Equitable Development Scorecard as it exists now. And there's opportunities for communities across the state and the country to adapt tools like this, right? But what this really is about, when you scratch under the word equity, what we're talking about is justice, right? And when we talk about justice, know that it's entirely about power. It is entirely about justice. This is what this document is, and this is what the living document will be for us on the West Side. It actually, I think, takes a seat as a moral document. This is a document that will reflect our values. It will reflect our priorities, project by project, of what we want to see on the West Side. The city comes to us and they ask us to make plans. And just like every other neighborhood, we make a small area plan, we make a 10-year plan, we make, part of that becomes part of a 20-year plan. But it takes so much more than the ink on the paper to make that plan come to life. And we can be prepared. They ask us, make these plans so that you can be prepared when development comes, right? Except for in our neighborhood, development rarely comes. And then when development does come, we go back to the plan and we see very little reflected of our voices and our intentions that were in that plan. So I guess what I wanted to say too is that if you think about it, what this would allow us to do is to put our thumb on the scale so that we can have weight when there's a measurement about what is equitable for the West Side. So this is, for us, this is going to, I believe, be something that could catapult our community for generations to come. Not just where we're at right now today, but what's going to happen for our children, for their children. What's the difference between the mile? That's what, there's a Professor Manuel Pastor out of California, and he says the difference between a mile. And really it's the difference of life opportunities, the difference of life chances that we have. And so this is what we have a setup for here today. And that's what I wanted to ground us in. So thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Hello, everyone.
All right. Hello.
My name is Miguel Brito. I know a couple of you, or a lot of you actually, but for those who don't know me, I am a lifelong resident here on the West Side of 18 years, and I have whole life. And I started volunteering here at Wesco just earlier this year. So we do have an agenda that we all want to get through because we know how important it is for us to get to conversation later. So I am up here just to introduce our speakers. So first I have Katie Royce with the Frogtown Neighborhood Association. Malik Holt Shabazz, yes, from Cura. Yep. Whoops. That's all right. And finally, Johi Pumplin from the Alliance for Metropolitan Stability. So each speaker is going to have 10 minutes to talk, and please hold all questions till the end. We're going to have about 20 minutes for questions and a conversation with each speaker. So I'll just give it up to Katie.
All right, thank you. Do people mind if I'm sitting and standing and going back and forth? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
I do have a large mouth. So, two things. I like Kura better. I think I'm going to start calling you guys Kura instead of Kira.
It does.
Yes, it has a ring to it. And second, I am not an expert on anything. I can hardly keep myself together. But I have been doing community work for about 30 years. And I'm good at relationships and I love people, and so that works. It all combines to be an expert in, what was I an expert in? Community something. Yeah. Community stuff, yeah. Well, no, but community stuff. So I've been at the Frogtown Neighborhood Association for about 5 years. I worked as the director of the Community Stabilization Project for about 18 years, and that's an affordable housing advocacy organization of tenants and people of color. And we actually had quite a large bit of work here on the west side as the Community Stabilization Project when we saved Concord Square, which is now Bluff Park Homes. But it was Concord Square. We sued HUD for repairs. They were trying to demo it. We fought the demolition. It was preserved, and now we have 118, I think, units of perpetually, hopefully, affordable housing. And so that was some of the work I did. West Siders, it was a tough group. We were challenging some of the old guard, and some of the folks that lived in Concord Square were not of the old guard, and so it was interesting work. But good work. So now I'm at Frogtown Neighborhood Association. We are, like Wesco, a district council. We don't call ourselves the Thomasdale District 7 Planning Council anymore, probably never will. We're the Frogtown Neighborhood Association, and this 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, we were started to get the word from the city that we were in our time for our small area plan. So have anyone here done a small area plan yet for Wesco? Is it coming up? Is that what this is?
No.
Kind of a, oh no? Okay.
We're good.
We're good?
We got our plan.
All right, good. I was like, oh, hell no. A small area plan, and it's just like this 10-year vision, and it's a very dry, usually, a very dry document that sits up on the shelf somewhere down at the Planning and Economic Development Center, or Department of the City. But it is a 10-year vision, so it is an opportunity for a community to actually do that, vision 10 years. But you know, you have to go to each geographic, and Frogtown, as I'm sure on the west side, we speak many languages from many cultures, so how do you get everyone talking about stuff on a similar basis? So it just seemed like major nightmare to me. But then we started talking about, as staff, kind of what the opportunity is and how it could be something different. And then God delivered a present to the Frogtown Neighborhood Association in the sense that we are developing the Victoria Theater, redeveloping an old vacant building for a performing arts center in Frogtown. We've been working on it for about 5 years. 2 years ago, we went through the CIB process. Do people know what the CIB process is? Capital Improvement Budget. It's where the city makes its decisions on capital improvements. Millions of dollars get flown through there. And they have a pretense, as they do on everything else, of giving the community a say in what happens in this money distribution system. And we took advantage of it. It's fairly rigorous. It's a bunch of folks from all parts of the city voting on what projects should get the money. So you have to give it a broad appeal, or it has to be something that really gets people in the heart. The Victoria Theater did. We did a great job of presenting it, of the ideas. We had a fantastic night grant that got us this really great outreach, and everyone from kids to elders were in on this planning. And so it was super cool. CIB got it. They awarded us $400,000, and then the mayor stole it. So all you are on the CIB process is an advisory system. The mayor can ignore you. And he did. He stole the money and put it towards a cop shooting range. Go figure. I know. That we were so busy we didn't nail him very publicly, very broadly, but we did have a social media campaign that went after him and said, why'd you steal the money? Give it back. Facebook, we had a bunch of people out there kind of pushing this. And then a very well-known artist, you guys probably heard of him, Seitu Jones, who lives in Frogtown, called me and said, and internally we were having this conversation about the small area plan. Why would people give a hoot? Why would they ever come to a meeting and talk about this? And they're working 2 and 3 jobs, you know? And so we're having this thing, and then this happens with the money, and the mayor steals them. This is the gift from God. It's coming. And so Seitu calls me and says, hey, I'm getting some award tomorrow, and Chris is going to be there, Chris Coleman, our mayor. And what should I say? I said, you should say, why'd you steal the money and give it back? Just like we've been saying on Facebook. So Seitu sees him. Do you have that thing? Seitu sees him and says, Mayor, why'd you steal the money? And the mayor, here's the gift, says, it wasn't in your small area plan. So we are still super pissed about the stealing of the money. This happens with Seitu. So at that point, we're talking about small area plan, and so we're like, That's the story. People know about the VIC. They care about the VIC. They're going to see that if it's not in the small area plan, that's why your project's not getting done. That's the importance of the small area plan. And then we thought, well, we can't just, how do we get that story out where people really get it? Well, we do a cartoon. And someone knew a young kid who was a lifetime Frogtowner, a little older than 18, but like that, young. And he's an illustrator, and he's working on becoming an illustrator professionally. So we're like, Seitu, what a perfect character, right? He's got the silver, do people know what Seitu, well, that's what he looks like. He's dark-skinned, beautiful silver glasses, and he looks like a brilliant guy, which he is. And Chris, who's been running around the country talking about how he's doing equity. Equity here, equity there. So the bubbles are saying equity, equity up there. And he meets Seitu, and we talk about what's really important. What's the resourcing, and why is it being resourced to a cop shooting range and not to a performing arts center? So this year, when they tried to do the same thing, and Chris did, he was foolish enough to think that that might work, and we weren't, all of a sudden we weren't eligible for community development block grant dollars. And so we can't give you the 400, and this time 62, that the CIB committee guaranteed us. So we were not going to get that. So he was 3 days away, I think, from his budget address, and we said, go ahead, take that, and don't find a one-for-one match, dollar-for-dollar match, or we will meet you at your budget address with a bunch of stuff. You will no longer be the king of equity. That is for damn sure. And dollar-for-dollar match from some fund. So get this, organizers, there's something called the land, oh, now I'm going to blow it. Liquidated asset fund. There's a liquidated asset fund at the city. And then this is this year's where we actually got the money, and I've forgotten it, but I'll remember it. There's funds down there where money can just like come out and find you your project. That can happen with the leverage. So the leverage started with that. That was widely distributed. People loved it. It was all over. Chris is from Frogtown. His first house was in Frogtown, so he has a lot of people that know him there. And that started then what has become what we call SMAPL. So everyone in Frogtown will recognize SMAPL. It is Small Area Plan. And we were like, what can we call it? What can we call it? And the guy that we hired to do, kind of runs the small area planning process in Frogtown is 2 minutes? Is a, okay, I'm going to start sending this around. So this is the small area plan. It's become a comic book. So it'll be like no other planning document, and we have done a broad range of outreach in the Frogtown neighborhood. The characters that you'll see in the SMAPL are 7 foot, they're taller than me by a lot, 7 foot characters that represent what you would have in a small area plan. We've got economic security, we've got housing, we've got quality of life, education, I think. But in there, so we would carry these characters around with us and have a conversation about that issue. And that's how we came up with SMAPL. So Tusaik Lee is a nationally acclaimed first among hip-hop artists in the nation. And he is a Frogtowner. So when he came, he was a year old. He was the only one in his family who'd been born in Laos. Came here as a year old, grew up in Frogtown, and it's brilliant. His way with words, if I need a word for something, I go to Tusaik. So Tusaik, we're sitting around thinking, what are we going to call this small area plan? Equity something, whatever. And he said, no, we're just going to call it SMAPL. And as soon as it came out of his mouth, we're like, oh, totally SMAPL. And everyone says SMAPL in Frogtown. That's been part of the process. And we still have lots of folks that we don't reach and are trying to reach. So that's just the way of the world with community work. But so Tusaik knew Mike, the young artist. So Mike comes in and does this cartoon, and then we're like, why don't we do it all in cartoon? Like, why isn't it an illustrated book? So that's what you have kind of circulating. The last 3 or 4 pages are going to be coloring book, so you can actually use it to color. And it talks about all the things we need to be talking about. And the Victoria Theater's in there. Thank you, Mayor Coleman. And it is really, what it is just a base. It doesn't give the policy directions we need to stop gentrification. We don't know those yet. it's going to be very important to dig deep and figure out what those are as a community, both West Side, Frogtown, East Side, like an alliance, and also an alliance metro-wide. So the work you're doing with the EIP, with the Met Council, is also happening in Brooklyn Park and Frogtown, and how are we bringing everyone together to talk about what those policies would look like. But it says, it lays the groundwork. We need policy here, we need to stop gentrification, we need to build artistry into our organizing, and that's the other thing. So we are, at Frogtown, committed to working with artists on everything. So, and we're all artists, so, right? But they've figured out a way to concentrate on their creativity neurons. We all need that. And they lead the way. Artists can help you lead the way, and young artists particularly. So that's MAPO.
Thank you.
You didn't even have to do it, right?
So I feel lucky and blessed to be working with Cura, because I get to work with neighborhoods and residents, and our organization has a motto that residents are the most powerful force against injustice in their community, and in stopping that in their community. I'm a former organizer and director for Harrison Neighborhood Association over on the north side. I'm a former director for District 6, which is the North and South Como area. And I am a property manager on the south side, and I'm the land use chair for Bryant Neighborhood Association. Okay. So with all that being said, this story that I'm about to tell you is going to sound very familiar. And at one point in time, we, and I think we still do, because I still consider myself part of Harrison, we considered Wesco to be our sister. There were a lot of different things that were happening historically, land use wise, organizing, very similar, very mirror twins. And so Harrison, so what's the old saying, right? So if you've probably been to Harrison if you've been to the impound lot if your car's been towed. So you've been to Harrison, right? So Harrison's face, or its main street, is Glenwood Avenue. So you have a neighborhood of 71% people of color. You have a resident area of 4,000 people. And what you have is you have an area that has been dealing with racist land use decisions that have been marginalizing the community since the 30s. And so what do you have? You have 37% of people in poverty. Superfund sites were put into that community because that's where you put Superfund sites when you have an area that's largely people of color. And what you also have is you have strong neighborhood ties and rich ethnic minority history. So there have been ethnic minorities coming into Harrison, from Jewish immigrants all the way to now this sort of burgeoning Somali population, as well as Southeast Asian leaders, right? And so what happens? The area gets targeted for redevelopment. And the area is right off of downtown. Starting to sound familiar? Okay. So it's targeted for redevelopment, and more businesses keep coming in on Glenwood, businesses that residents can't afford. And so there comes this divide. There's like this one street that divides both areas called Cedar Lake Road. West Glenwood, East Glenwood. The West Glenwood side is the area sort of with your community businesses. Your East Glenwood side is more of your design businesses. So you have a history of redlining, reverse redlining through the subprime loans and the foreclosure crisis, and then decades of disinvestment. So what happens is, right around the impound lot, the city begins to look at this area that normally was not an undesirable land use, 230 acres of land, and comes up with this idea that the way that we can really sort of grow downtown and really create this sort of economic stimulus on the north side is to create this area called Bassett Creek Valley. And so you're talking about now 500,000 square feet of retail coming into the area. They go into a 20-year plan, so a plan is put in place. 6,000 new units of housing. $2 billion worth of development coming into the area. $125 million in tax revenue going to the city. So when you're going to put something that big in a community that could just literally become the new Harrison or even develop the community, and it's being done by, they already have a national developer in place that's looking at the area. Starting to sound familiar? Okay.
Twins.
Right?
We're twins.
Right? So it's Ryan Companies. So Ryan Companies is already talking to the city about how we can work with the neighborhood to plan out this 20-year process and be partners. So the community needs to organize. And so the community, the how, is that the residents begin to organize and start co-creating a curriculum that is anti-racist, so looking at that, looking at things from a racial lens, beginning to educate and empower residents and businesses to look at when development is coming into the area, what are going to be the environmental impacts, what are the racial disparities and impacts, and then how do we conduct, which is what we did, we conducted direct actions while we were doing this training program. Sending people through and then building a community benefits coalition. So, with that, 650 residents were engaged with businesses. If you were going to work with Harrison, you had to go through that process with us. If you were going to be our partner, if you were going to be a business coming in, and if you were going to work through our process, you had to go through it. That way we knew there was going to be a shared language, a shared analysis, shared criteria, and a mechanism that we could continue to use so that we didn't have to keep reinventing the wheel. Thanks for the 5 minutes. So, with that being said, the 650 folks, businesses, developers, etc., residents, were engaged. And then we developed guiding principles for development. Getting all these people together, revisiting it, ratifying it, and then going into the 4 different areas. Making sure that those guiding principles for development were put in small area plans, city development agreements, mission statements, visions that the community was, the committees that we had were going to be operating from that, and ultimately that Bassett Creek Valley master plan. And the developer and the city council fought it, and they were mad, but it went in. After all those actions, after all the meetings, after all the sit-ins out on the streets, after working with so many different partners, it came in. So then we decided that, and this is some of the work that I'm now carrying forward to Bryant, because now I've developed a scorecard for them, because it's just so much easier, right? Instead of, because sewer came into Bryant. Everybody's heard the sewer story. If you haven't heard it, I'll be here, right? I'll tell you about it in the parking lot, right? But the co-op came in. It was something where people can't do full grocery shopping. Now, we did have some pretty high hiring numbers there. We have 61% people of color working there. But still, it's not full grocery shopping, right? People are still doing the grocery shopping wrong. So why continue to keep mounting these fights over and over again when we can get people empowered on what do you want, how do you enforce it, and how do we have something that we can continue to keep working off of, right? Look, we're not, I'm just going to speak for Bryant, right? We're not against new development coming into Bryant. But the residents that are in that community, they need to stay there. Yep. Right? If you're bringing in new development, it can't cause displacement. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Right? It just doesn't. So, we have a scorecard. The scorecard comes out of this. Guiding principles get turned into this scorecard. The committee uses it, and committees use it, and boards use it, Brian and Harrison, so that when any kind of land use decision needs to be scored, then you either get an approval with conditions, or a denial. And anybody can come in and use that scorecard. And what you'll see on that scorecard is you will see a proactive language that says, We want this kind of housing. We don't want these kind of racial impacts. We're looking at poverty reduction. Good score? Great. Now, the one small sort of ingenious thing that we've decided to do is that we consider this to be a team process. Ooh, 2 minutes. Wow.
No, that's what I said.
Right. So we also, Bryant and Harrison, sent the scorecard down to our city planner to sort of check it. What do you think of it? That way, we now have and we're not necessarily saying that the city planner is going to fully agree with it. But what we do want is that when we send development proposals down there, they know before you come into this neighborhood, you know what you got to go through.
Yes. Right.
So don't even bring the development proposal unless you're going to be meeting our community benefits.
Yes.
Like, there's no stronger experts about community than the community. Okay, so we have that. So you know what you're stepping into. The city planner's now roped in on it. So get ready for the scorecard. Here it is. It's online. You can check it out. But now what we have is we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. We don't have to keep falling into this take it or leave it approach that developers come in with. We have a collective approach and a mechanism so we can continue to keep really striving for the housing types we want, the equitable development that we want, the jobs that we want, the environmental standards we want in the buildings that go in, and preservation of the community ultimately. Shared analysis, shared process, shared plan of action, shared language with a racial equity focus. And it's all about being proactive. Now it's true, and Katie just said this a few minutes ago. Developers come in, city comes in. A lot of times it's like, well, we really don't need your, we can just keep going. But whether you bypass us or not, you're going to need us at some point. You're always going to need community buy-in. Whether it's a variance, whether you're going to get a zoning change, but you're always going to need something from the community. You're always going to need something from the neighborhood association and the district council. So it's better to get the community buy-in up front and to put our community benefits front-ended versus back-ended, or there's going to be some consequences. There's going to be people, there's going to be a room this big looking at a developer wishing they would have had a pizza meeting with you first before they went forward. So I'm going to respect my time and move over to Juhi. And then I just want to say that I have copies of the new Bryant scorecard up here as well as the old Harrison scorecard. So thank you.
Okay, so we heard some great stories, and I am not a storyteller, so I hope y'all had your coffee. I'm going to kind of just talk a little bit about the scorecard itself. I'm not going to walk you through it because I know that Monica is going to do that later, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of a high-level perspective of the scorecard. Thank you. I'm Juhi. I'm with the Alliance for Metropolitan Stability. I also used to work with the Asian Economic Development Association, where we're very concerned about gentrification of our small businesses on University Avenue, and so we created the Little Mekong Arts and Culture District on University and Western, and now I am at the Alliance. So, let me grab my notes. Katie, I'm also a mess, but I am truly a mess.
Did I call myself a mess? Only Juhi can call me.
Okay. Anyways, that's on camera? Okay. So the scorecard, I just want to offer some high-level highlights of the scorecard. And you just heard the story of kind of its origins, right? Harrison neighborhood actually was a very essential leader in developing the scorecard, right? Actually, let me take a step back. Like West Side and why you guys are convening around this, development is threatening our communities, right? We've created these communities that are very diverse, that kind of meet the needs of our families and our communities, and have a natural affordability to them. The businesses that we want to see in our communities are here, and so we're all concerned about what's going to happen when and if a developer comes in and creates a new high-rise luxury apartment building, new commercial spaces, putting in what are those bike pathways, which some are good, but it's like, what does that do to your community? And so, so the desire for equitable development is universal across all of us. But the challenge in the beginning, as Malik kind of mentioned, was that there just was not a shared language around it. So just like equity, right? What is equity? What is equitable development? Right? So if people wanted to talk about equitable development, there's like, well, Malik might have a perspective, I might have a perspective, Bahia has her own perspective, and so what is that? It's going to be similar, but we don't have the same language around it. And then how does it play out then in development? Again, we have visions of what we want to see happen, but it doesn't necessarily all play out. So the scorecard was an opportunity for communities to come together and really begin putting some shared language and framework around that. And I think that is why it's the equitable development principles and scorecard, because it's not just about the scoring, but it's what are the principles that we all uphold within development, right? Yeah. So this was a response to that, but we also wanted to be able to quantify it. So how do we say that project is not equitable then? And that's where the scorecard component comes in. How we measure it, how we evaluate it, and being able to do that in a concrete way so that we can go back to that developer or the city and be able to say, this is not equitable because of these things. These are equitable because of these things, right? So we want to be able to do that as well. So it creates the definition framework. And then ideally, and I think Malik mentioned this too, or referred to this, is that ideally the vision and the benefits that the community wants to see from this development project will result in a community benefits agreement. So how many people have a strong grasp of a community benefits agreement? Okay, good, awesome. So I am going to define it for you anyways, because I'm up front. But community benefits agreements are the big thing about it is that it's a legal contract with the city and developer, right? And so essentially, it starts out with the community defining the benefits that it wants to see, right? So we want to see this type of affordable housing, we want to see this kind of commercial development, then we want to see this kind of access to all of these things. And then we negotiate that with the city and developer, right? Exactly like Harrison says, this is what we want, so if you're going to come into our community, you need to work with us to figure out how does your project meet any of these goals. And then it becomes a legal document and part of that city's agreement with the developer, right? So I am not going to say that is not possible. That is possible, and a lot of communities have successfully put together a community benefits agreement. However, if you can't get it to that level of getting it into the contractual legal piece, then a community compact is, and I don't know if this is sexist, but it's like a gentleman's agreement, right? So you say, okay, well, if you come into our community, this is what we want to see, and you work with them to come to an agreement and have that, and make sure that comes out of the project. And if it doesn't, at least you have this agreement to come back and hold them accountable, whether or not they follow through on it. Again, that's the community's. I hate to say this, it's a community's responsibility to make sure that they're accountable because there's no legal implication for it. So, Does that make sense? Okay. So, the one thing that I want you to take away is that the tool is only as good as its users, right? So, if I was a developer and I wanted to gentrify all of the riverfront, and I think that that's going to bring in all this tax money for the city, and then I say, well, let me use this equitable development scorecard, right? And what we want to see under engagement, what we want to see under land use, and I define it all. I use the scorecard, right? But is it meeting its purpose? And so it's really only as good as its users. And that is, so therefore, effective use of the scorecard is broad engagement, right? Because even if I have good intention, I want to have affordable housing to, 30% of the area median income. I want to have commercial space that are small for startups, or even maybe an incubator market space of some sort, things that reflect what I understand community wants. Then I come here and I tell you all, hey, I created these equitable benefits from this project for everybody. What do you think? Again, that's not going to go anywhere, right? I mean, for a process. But then when I go to the developer in the city's going to be like, well, who's with you on this? And I'll be like, well, I just did this because I've been doing community work for so long, and I just do, right? So you need to have... Not the first time I've done it. And so it's... So you really want to make sure you have the broad engagement, because again, also if it's just Westco, right, and there's a lot of other players on the west side, right, and if you don't get them on board, you guys might end up fighting, right, and then the city never feels accountable to anybody, because they're like, well, you guys are fighting amongst yourselves, you go do that, we'll figure it out over here then, right, and so it's really important to have that broad support so you guys can work together. It requires a strong equity lens, right? Again, if I, have this, one specific perspective of what I want for the community, and it doesn't even, I'm not going to badmouth the Asian community, but if I was like, I want the west side to all be Asian, East Asian, and we're going to do this and that, we're going to have Korean barbecues, and you'll be like, that'd be kind of cool. But, but it's going to displace you, right? And so you want to make sure that you have a strong equity lens that really reflects the community that's there, and that and it's really about the people who live there and are going to be impacted by this development project. And I'm not saying that you guys don't have that, but just kind of a reminder. And then lastly, the scorecard is a way to begin conversation, right? It's not intended to just be taken as is today and say, okay, let's use this. The idea is that you take the scorecard, you'll reflect on what's there, but it starts the conversation. Does community engagement, equitable community engagement, do these things that are listed in here match what we want to see? Do we want something stronger? Is the land use, are these good questions for what's going on here? Do we want something different? And so it's about starting that conversation. And then even in the review process, when you're doing the scoring, you see there's a lot of space in there so that you can take notes, because it's going to be about a conversation of ultimately what is it that you guys want as benefits in your community. And so, so I guess the final say is just that it's as good as its users. And that's it. All right.
All right, give it up for the panels. They're sitting back up. So we're going to move into the question and answer section of the panel. Just a couple thoughts about this section. We've got about a half an hour, so definitely some opportunities to hopefully throw a lot of questions to the panel and have some good discussion. Just kind of to keep us moving, if folks can just raise their hand and have a question, wait till you're called on. try and keep it brief and to the point in the interest of having as many people have the opportunity to ask questions. Panelists, don't feel like every panelist has to answer every question. If one or two people want to just jump in and get it, that's awesome. And then lastly, you can either, if you want to direct your questions to a specific panelist or the panelist, the whole panel, that's fine too. So with that, let's hear what questions you all have.
I have a question for you, Malik. How did you seize that power? Was that ultimately showing up and so that you can leverage the approval for variant agreements, variances, and those sorts of things at the latter part? Is that what you leverage?
Yeah, so it's really interesting when you have 10 minutes, right? So like it's like there's so much there's so many nooks and crannies to like community organizing in the story. So it all started because there was me and Judy know this guy, he's Winston. So there's an African American homeowner and business owner who came into our neighborhood association, and he challenged the neighborhood on, so are the city neighborhood dollars really going to African Americans, or is it mainly going to white homeowners? And so he actually came to Cura. I was not quite at Harrison yet, and he came to Cura, and they actually did a pretty in-depth analysis about where dollars were going for Northside organizations, particularly Harrison. And then once the information came out that he was right, then the organization decided to make a complete change about how they did business, bringing in anti-racist, undoing racism organizing. And then as more and more folks of color came into the organization, and as more and more white allies felt this alliance between people of color trying to take their community back, that's when the power started to generate, where it was like, okay, now we're together on this. We have this shared thinking and analysis and power now. How do we begin to really organize with this? And then it just blew up from there. So
Who's facilitating
Yeah,
this?
I can call on people too.
Let's go here, then here.
Yeah, hand up first for things.
I was just wondering what your time frame was for this process that you just explained. Like, for how many years did this happen?
Yeah, so again, this is the 10 minutes thing again. So it's I left out a couple of things. Like, even though, Bassett Creek is it's this development that keeps going. The two things I left out is that the neighborhood is being bordered by 2 light rail lines coming in, plus the $2 billion development. Penn Avenue is going to be a BRT line. And then at some point, they were actually going to torpedo the development that I just told you about, and then put another undesirable land use in there and put a train storage yard right off the side with 14 to 16 diesel trains. So here's the community's dreams, and now we're about to do the same thing we did all over again with another possible Superfund site that's going to be there. So that was the long answer. The short answer is that this process just keeps going, but this all started in 2000, and it's still going. So it just keeps going.
So what do you guys think about advocating to get some of city or state budget to help us organize in this, 5 to 6 year plan for our community here in the West Side? Because the reason why I've asked that, I really had a problem with St. Case. Of course, we know about that situation that happened. So I went to City Hall and I asked City Councils, I said, somebody pay for that. That whole thing, and they sent out 55 police, 9 K9 units, and a helicopter, an aircraft to hunt down a black man that didn't exist, or at the same time 5,500 black men that's racially targeted at the same time. The city paid for that. Our taxes pay for that, for that operation. That could have went to the community and the West Side District of St. Paul or something like that. But now, can we get a refund? No, we can't get a refund. That's off of what one privileged man had fabricated and lied about. So my question is, how can we prevent that and get that money to help us build a better community instead of putting it into police operations like that, based on what one privileged man has said?
Look to the liquidated asset fund. No, but that's the point, right? It is, where's the money and who's getting it?
And can we get
right?
a refund?
I like the refund idea, I really do. Where is the money going? And that is a critical question for organizing. What we're talking about with SMAPL, by the way, where is SMAPL in the room? The SMAPL, there's SMAPL, this is a living document that we need, you need to track the money and policy to access it.
Let's go here and then over here.
All right, this is just a thought and a question to what you guys think. You know, I've been looking at this for a long, long time. I am a minority, and the equity lens that you mentioned, I see roadblocks to economic opportunity in like the modern immigration laws, 1. 2, use of private and selling of private information, and particularly credit scores. What does credit scores have to do with somebody getting a job? A lot. Read into. 3, look at departments that historically were established to promote equity and economic development. Those are like the Human Rights Department, EOC. Are they failing us? Open those up and see what's going on there. And what do you guys think of that?
So
You think we have to fix this before we can actually get to that? Because a lot of this actually creates what we're talking about.
yeah, so there's, one thing is very interesting is that, I know there's always this resistance whenever I'm doing my trainings on organizing to building base. And I think the more people that we get involved and that we have on tracks of leadership development, the more power we have. And so that's one thing. I think we need, the more and more people we build this synergy and we have this organizing power, the more we can get what we want and demand, including the funding that the gentleman mentioned earlier. One of the other things is that the beauty of doing community engagement, similar to the scorecard, because Juhi said it's the start of a conversation. Neighborhood groups and district councils have to check in with the community on if they're really working on relevant projects. And there were times where we would stop, and there's lots of places to engage community. The annual meeting is one of them, right? But another place is where you can actually do, like, we're just going to check in on the community and see things where they're at. So there's been times where we've stopped what we were doing because the issue of the day in Harrison was that we needed our residents to get felonies expunged off their records, right? Not community gardens. So sometimes you got to recheck in. So some of the issues that you're bringing up, it's like, is it time to check in and go, okay, you know what? There's a lot of residents that are coming out bringing up some of these issues. Maybe we need to have a committee or something that gets dedicated to that, in addition to doing scorecard and development stuff. So that's my answer to
But
that.
have you run across these issues with people in the community you work in? Have they mentioned this?
They have mentioned it. And to me, when those kind of things come up at community listening sessions or whatever you want to call them, because not everybody likes those, but when those things come up, it's in our purview as leaders in the community to go, this is an important issue. We need to dedicate some people power to really addressing this issue, and we need to get the resources and say we need some additional monies to really look at this issue that's hurting our whole community.
I have 2 questions. Can you define what you mean by Superfund sites? And then also I wanted to ask if the 10-year plan is like edited or updated on a regular basis. So it's 10-year plan now, and then we go out a year and do another 10-year plan, and then like.
Not normally, and that's why I said it sits on a shelf. So we're saying this MAPL is a living document that will lead us to policies that give us what we need, addressing some of the issues we're talking about.
So you submit the 10-year plan to the
City.
mayor, And then it's a 10-year plan for 10 years.
Yep. Right? Seems ridiculous, right? So that's why the whole "it's not in your small area plan" was just ridiculous.
Can you amend it though?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think you can amend it, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, and what's super fun?
Yeah, so community, I mean, in a lot of ways, we don't really know where all we're lucky to have a group like the MPCA that looks for these sites, right? So federal Superfund sites are sites that are so polluted and they cause so much damage to a neighborhood that you need federal money to clean them up. And Harrison was an area that had Superfund sites going all the way back to the 30s and beyond, where we had companies that would just dump oil straight into the ground and pollute our groundwater. We had a chemical company that would actually just dump it right into the ground as well. Because once again, it's an area where, because of all the marginalization that happened in the racist land decisions, you can cite it there because the political power is lacking in that community to fight it. So the Superfund site money is gone now. It used to be a great program. You'd list it, you'd get the federal dollars, they clean it up, they work with the cities. But that's a Superfund site. It gets designated, it gets cleaned up, etc. But that program's gone away now.
Can I share a little bit about that? Just some history since the questions are coming up.
Yeah.
One, we have our 10-year plan. I think it was done in 2013, before I came into this role. And then, so we do, Westside has a 10-year plan. It's on our website. You can link to it. You should look at it. It sounds very robust engagement around it. And then the West Side, this is why we are like sisters and twins throughout the time. We were a Superfund site. We were designated a Superfund cleanup site on the riverfront. The industrial park left those toxins that need to be remediated. And that's why there hasn't been development for such a long time until now. So that's a little bit of like our history and why we're so closely aligned with the work that's happened in the neighborhood over there. And these neighborhoods don't happen by mistake. These neighborhoods are intentional because of policies and practices that were put in place. So what we're talking about is reversing that. Okay, I'll stop.
Martine and then Jerry.
Stop.
I'm glad you brought up the issue about transportation and these rail lines. I'm from Los Angeles, just moved here a few months ago, really interested in this issue because
Welcome.
that is a major site of development. And that is a major site. They sell these rail lines to the community buys them because, oh, we don't have decent transportation, so we need a rail line in our neighborhood. And once they do that, they become development around the station. It's amazing how much condominiums are built around the subway lines and the rail by rail transit. What is your experience here with those kind of transportation projects? I see a little bit along the rail lines and where they go and who they serve, because they're definitely going to the stadiums, they're definitely going to the malls. But I'd like to know a little bit about that and what challenges you brought or found around issues of transportation. I also have questions about another second question is, do you have any kind of, what are your legal resources as far as down the line that you might have to take legal action? Do you have things in the works on stuff like that for anybody?
I mean, there was a lawsuit along the Green Line when it was being developed 7-8 years ago now. A group out of the Aurora St. Anthony Block Club or Aurora St. Anthony Community Development Corporation. It was mostly African American folks challenging it as a repeat of Rondo. Are you familiar with Rondo? And so that helped. I think that they were, you know, I think the final legal stuff was you don't have. What's the word when you have a skin in the game for legal?
Standing.
You don't have standing. How I forgot that, I have no idea. But you don't have standing, you know, there's other excuses. But what it did was help lay the groundwork for the other groups that were in coalition with Aurora St. Anthony to get the 3 stops. So we didn't have any stops between Rice or Marion and I think Hamlin or Snelling, right? There were no stops in Frogtown, exactly, none in Rondo, and so that lawsuit laid the groundwork for effective organizing that got those 3 stops created. But it's absolutely, the 2 blocks on into the Frogtown end of the Green Line, rents are now about $350, $400 more than they were 2 years ago. So it is happening. And it is disastrous for poor folks that live along the line.